Almost all the marriages in my family have been arranged marriages. My mom's marriage to my bio dad was an arranged marriage, but it ended up in a messy divorce and him completely abandoning us before I was even born. My mom had a love marriage the second time, despite the disapproval of her family, and has been much happier with my stepdad than she probably would have ever been with my bio dad. Because of this, my mom has always been very adamant that she would not try to force us, my siblings and I, into arranged marriages despite what the rest of our family thought. I've been with my fiancé for 3 years now. We got engaged 2 months ago. He's met my parents and siblings, but as far as the majority of my extended family were concerned, I was single until 2 months ago. Early last year, my fiancé dropped me off home after work one day and my uncle was there. My uncle is the oldest sibling my mom has, so he's seen as the head of the family. He thinks he has a say in what the rest of us do. It was obvious my uncle was pissed, and he ended up grilling my fiancé, and I assume he met his standards. A lot of arranged marriages are about what both families can gain from one another, so he told my mom to get us married quickly. He wanted to make it look like we had an arranged marriage before the rest of our family found out. My mom ignored him and told us to keep dating if it's what we wanted. Over the past year, he's mentioned me getting married to my mom every single time he's spoken to her. Apparently, my uncle assumed just because he'd given the order that we were going to get married soon. He told my cousin, his daughter, that I had agreed to an arranged marriage, and because I had and she was older, she should agree to the match he'd found her. My cousin never mentioned this to me, but she did agree to marry the man my uncle found for her. They got married late last year. They haven't had a good marriage and my cousin is very unhappy. Her husband is incredibly controlling and hardly ever lets her go anywhere without him or a member of his family. Last week, she was over at my house when my fiancé came over to drop some of the clothes I'd left at his place over. When I told my family about my engagement, they all assumed it was an arranged marriage and I didn't bother clarifying because it really isn't anyone's business. You don't tend to do sleepovers if you're having an arranged marriage, so my cousin knew immediately it wasn't what she assumed. She started asking me questions about my relationship and I answered honestly. She got really angry at me and kept demanding to know why I didn't tell her about him. The thing is, I'm very close to this cousin, but I also know how our family is about dating and I didn't want my male cousins trying to strong-arm my fiancé. They've jokingly threatened this before. She pretty much blamed me for her arranged marriage and said she only agreed because she thought I was going to have one too, and if I had told her I had a boyfriend, she would have had the courage to stand up to her family. She hasn't spoken to me since. I do feel bad for her. I know how unhappy she is, but if she had mentioned what my uncle told her earlier, I would have clarified. I don't want this to be the end of our relationship, but I don't know what I can do to fix this. I and my husband tried for 5 years to get pregnant. Testing eventually revealed I have eggs of steel, and without medical help I'll never get pregnant. So that's what we did. Gave our samples, 1 petri dish, and 9 months later I have 2 beautiful fraternal twin boys, Jack and Adam. Thing is, Jake has a condition. Without going into detail, requires a shot once a week. Once he is older he can take pills. I went back to work and mother-in-law offered to watch the babes. She's wonderful. I trust her 100%. They were 9 months. Now 16 months. During this time she would give his injection as we had a schedule. 10 a.m. before snack and nap. Worked very well until a month ago when she gave the shot to the wrong kid. Now they may be fraternal, but they look identical. I'll be honest, my husband and I even mix them up sometimes. Everyone does. She immediately noticed her mistake, called 911, and they were transferred to hospital. By the time I got there, Adam had been given the reversal agent and they were both happily sipping on juice, loving the attention. We went home the same night told to push fluids. He was never in danger. It's a very slow-acting medication that, at worst, would have given him diarrhea in a few days. Mother-in-law was beside herself. I tried to ease her worry, but she refused to babysit, so to daycare they went. This daycare has a nurse cause some of the kids have medications, so she knew what to do, but the worry of mixing up the kids was a valid concern, and they would not keep name tags on. doctor recommended a medical tattoo. Explained they tattoo a freckle, no bigger than the end of a pencil eraser, on an area of skin that's easily seen while the child is under mild sedation, similar to dental offices. Because of the area, it usually fades in 2 to 3 years, but by then they should have developed more personal features, and may not need it redone. So after discussion with my husband, we did it. He has a 2 mm brown freckle on his earlobe. From entering the office to leaving it took 30 minutes. Never felt a thing. Mother-in-law lost her shit the second I mentioned a medical tattoo. I tried to explain, but she just freaked out, so I put both kids on the floor and told her to pick up Jack and find the tattoo. She picked up Adam, so I handed her Jack, and after 20 minutes still couldn't find it. Stripped him to his skivvies. I finally pointed it out and she went, "That's just a freckle," I just said. My point exactly. Adam doesn't have a freckle there. So that's how daycare can tell them apart. She's still pissed and ranting. Once I explain to others and they fail to find it, they understand, but they still think I went too far in tattooing my child and altering their body. I believe I took the necessary precautions recommended by the doctor, and the tattoo will fade with sun exposure, and as he grows, by the time he's 5, it probably won't even be visible, or it'll just look like a faded freckle. I, 29F, dated a guy Joe, 30M, for 3 months before he left me to go back to his ex Kim, 30F. Right after we broke up, I found out I was pregnant, and now I'm at 24 weeks. I let him know and he was ecstatic. Turns out his girlfriend had fertility issues and would likely never be able to get pregnant naturally, and he has always wanted to be a father. Getting back together was out of the question for both of us, so he's still with his girlfriend. Joe was only allowed at the initial appointment because of COVID-19, and we found out I was having twins. According to Joe, when he told Kim, she had a mental breakdown about her infertility and wanted to talk to me. I met them at their house, and Kim stated that she wanted to be involved in my pregnancy because she would eventually be the children's stepmother. She started telling me that I needed to do a home birth, that I needed to formula feed so that they could have the babies half of the week, that she wanted 1 boy and 1 girl, and that she wanted the kid to call her mama since they would be calling me mommy. I shut her down and said I would make the best choices for my children and my body, and left. Kim continued to be overbearing and texting me every day about my eating habits, exercise habits, and ing about how her job wouldn't let her take maternity leave. At the virtual genetics counseling appointment, she attended instead of Joe and took over the whole meeting, trying to talk about her family history, which wasn't relevant. When it came time for my 20-week level 2 scan, they allowed me 1 guest, and Joe suggested I take Kim instead of him, which I refused to do. Joe did end up coming, and he found out the gender because I wanted to keep it a surprise for me so we could throw a gender reveal party. I put a pregnancy announcement on my social media, and then she put up an announcement saying they were expecting twins, the non-traditional way, and how blessed she was. I was irritated, but I kept my mouth shut. Then she threw a gender reveal party and posted it on social media. I wasn't even invited. She also announced that she's having a baby shower. I commented on her posts and told her to stop treating me like a surrogate, that the kids weren't hers, and that Joe didn't have any claim or custody of the kids until they are born. I then called Joe and reiterated all of this and stated that I would not be seeing either of them until we went to family court, and that my mother would be my birthing partner. He and Kim and some of her friends and family are saying I'm an asshole, and her mother even called and insisted I give her one of my babies. Like, this is the Parent Trap? I'm definitely getting a lawyer ASAP. Y'all have scared the shit out of me, but I'm happy you did. We used condoms because I do not react well to hormonal birth control, and I had to wait to get a non-hormonal IUD because of other medical issues. The Thursday I posted this, I went to the police and they stated that there was nothing they could do because a crime hadn't been committed. In my state, orders of protection are criminal or family, so I was able to get one against Joe. On Friday, I did get a lawyer, and they let me know in my state there was nothing I could do as far as custody before the babies are born. So I will be leaving my state soon to ensure that this isn't my baby's home state and I can't be charged with anything. Kim came to my job, damaged my car, and broke a bunch of office windows. I work with kids, so she was arrested for not just the criminal damage and trespassing but also child endangerment, so hopefully that works in my favor. Also, if Joe did it on purpose, I don't think Kim knew. Because she was screaming at me about how I stole her life and everything I had was supposed to be hers. I have orders of protection against both Kim and Joe. I left the state anyway and Joe and Kim started harassing me again because there's no legal jurisdiction when you leave the state. But I have enough evidence that I was able to press charges in my current state as well and will be pursuing a restraining order here. I have been with my partner for 7 years. We initially met online, and after meeting in person a few times and realizing our affection for one another, we found it promising to move in together. I moved from California to Pennsylvania to be with him throughout graduate school. All was seemingly well during this time. I have never really had any reason to not trust him. I encouraged him to very much so, to try his best to make friends, or to explore hobbies on his own outside of the various ones we share, because I have my own passions. And I found we connected most when we met in the middle through conversations about these passions, through the act of explaining or showcasing what we've taken in or learned. Throughout these 7 years, he has struggled with very low self-esteem. And though I don't necessarily think of myself as the pillar of self-love, the depth of mine doesn't reach the low perception of his self-value. Because of this, he has seen and stopped seeing both a counselor and a therapist, and has been on medication to help for the last 6 months. Things were seemingly well between us, and continued to be pretty fluid. We continued to share things, and take long walks, and were pretty open-ended about where we stood in the relationship. If one was feeling a bit of an ebb, the other would pick up more of a share, and vice versa. However, things took a bit of a dip about 2 days ago when I felt the ebb, and asked him about it. Initially, he said there was really nothing wrong. And perhaps I was just feeling this way because with our schedules we haven't been able to see one another for long periods of time like we are used to, which is true. But the feeling continued to irk me, and when I asked about it a second time, he confessed to me. He had begun talking to another girl from another country via Instagram direct messages. And though things between she and him never crossed the boundaries of platonic friendship, he really loved the initial rush of someone asking him questions about his favorite movie, his favorite album, his favorite book. All things he and I already know very well about one another. I asked if he'd sent any selfies, or anything risque, and he said no, though I can't confirm, because he deleted the messages. A good deal of me believes him, because of how open he was about the initial conversations to begin with. We slept apart, and I just felt really confused the entire night, because I couldn't really resonate with wanting that sort of attention from someone else. If anything, his yearning for that type of attention sort of hurt. It felt like I wasn't doing enough, or giving enough. The next morning, though I don't have an Instagram, and am not on the app, I went to check his using the desktop version, and found that posts where he once called me the love of his life, or a specific post with a gift I gave him that once said, "Greatest gift from the greatest girl," were still on his profile, but the words, girlfriend, or love of my life, were completed erased. With this realization, my confusion and hurt turned to very real heartache. I called him and asked if he had deleted these words from the specific posts, and with shame, he said yes, he did. When I asked why, he said it was because he just didn't want the attention from the girl asking him about himself to be disrupted if she found out he was in a long-term relationship. I guess this is where I asked the obvious and questioned why someone who is just asking about your favorite books, movies, etc., would be driven away by the fact that you have a girlfriend. And he said he didn't know why he did it, and that it was a massive mistake. At the risk of seeming toxic, and I will take full accountability for seeming so or being so, I asked him to please deactivate his Instagram for the time being while we sort through this, his Twitter as well. He did, and though I was feeling a bit of relief about that, I couldn't help but feel a bit saddened that he didn't choose to do that on his own for the benefit of our relationship. He had to wait for me to ask. Which again, just made me feel like such a toxic and controlling partner. Two things I always strive to be so far from. When he got home from work, we discussed everything at massive length, and he continued to swear up and down that these conversations pertained strictly to music, movies, and books, and he didn't have interest in her. Just interest in the initial rush of the attention he was receiving. We read a few articles, and he broke things down to me as his self-esteem has never been lower. Despite his career as a doctor being at a high, and his finances in order, he felt things with his music weren't taking off. And with that came a feeling that he wasn't special, and it was nice for someone to make him feel that way. I felt shame and asked him if I wasn't doing enough or giving enough to him to make him feel that way. He said, I defiantly was. But my love, and attention and affection, became a pillar he could rely on, and got used to, so with new attention came a rush. And he liked that. I asked him if he wanted to be single, and find that rush in dating new people. And he kept insisting that that's so far from what he wants. He wants to remain a couple, and do all he can to work on these things together. Though I can't help but correlate that feeling he enjoys with the feeling of a first date. Which hurts, of course. I told him I didn't really see how we could move past this because there was nothing much for me to make an attempt to work on moving forward. This seems to be a self-stemming problem that I emphasize with, but just don't want to be on the receiving end of the counter effects. So though it is incredibly uneasy to begin to think of how difficult it'll be to begin again, it is just as difficult to think about how difficult it would be to stay and try to rebuild back up an issue that I feel like just a bystander. When it comes to this has all been very painful, and if this comes to an end I just want it to be as civil and as possible. He deserves to love himself, but not at the expense of the love we have between us. I deserve love that is stable and comforting, and not laced with newfound paranoia. Despite this all, my heart is still very much in this, of course, and he has been very vocal about how it was just one mistake. Nothing happened, we can work through this, etc. And I secretly keep hoping he will make a step, any step really, to showcase these words and implement action, seek a new therapist. Find the two of us a relationship counselor, buy a book on self-help or on how couple conquer affairs, anything at all. Without me having to be the one to ask him. I just want him to have that yearning that he continues to say he has, but instead of saying it, I was him to show me. That makes me irrational or just plain dumb. I believe to be in a state where I can handle either answer. Or something completely different just the same. Do all think I'm blowing something completely out of proportion? Given how this was an exchange of conversation between him and another girl for just a few days. And his erasure of me on his profile was only for about 2 days? This has been a first in this relationship, this has been a first in my life truthfully. I just felt completely vulnerable and isolated.